You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Hi, I'm Franco Luna Puma Podcast. You're listening to Teka Teka News. In this episode,
So we've known from our long-term monitoring of climate that the Earth has been warming since pre-industrial times. We're seeing a clear and dramatic warming decade on decade since at least the 1970s.
mabilis ka na bang pawisan at mas napapadalas ang pag-inom mo ng malamig na tubig? Or maybe you're surprised at how fast the weather changes. Hindi ka nag-iisa at yan ang pag-uusapan natin ngayon.
So this long-term warming, it's being driven by concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which continue to increase. And the three main greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, have all reached record observed highs. So we're seeing this long-term warming trend.
That was Professor Chris Hewitt. He's Director of Climate Services at the World Meteorological Organization, or WMO. He was speaking at a press conference organized by the WMO to present the findings of their latest report. And you heard it right, we have just gone through the warmest month on record.
At the beginning of July, Copernicus Climate Change Service declared June to be the warmest June on record. A week later, we announced that the daily global mean temperature at the beginning of July, on the 5th and the 6th, exceeded the maximum record previously recorded. The first week of July turned out to be the warmest week on record.
Yan naman si Carlo Bontempo. He is Director of Copernicus Climate Change Service at the European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts. The temperature for the first 23 days of July averaged 16.95 degrees Celsius. And that's well above the previous record of 16.63 degrees Celsius set in July 2019.
We can say that the first 3 weeks of July have been the warmest 3 weeks period ever observed in our record. And digging a bit deeper into that information, if we look at the top 21 hottest day in terms of the global mean temperature, they have all occurred this month.
We have indeed experienced the hottest temperatures in human history. The warmest year on record so far was in 2016 with about 1.28 degrees centigrade above the global mean. And that year it was associated with a strong El Nino event in combination with a long-term warning of the climate system. But this year's record was so bad that experts had split opinions. There are other scientists who say this is the warmest it's been in 120,000 years.
This anomaly is so large with respect to other record-breaking months in our record that we are virtually certain that the month as a whole will become the warmest July on record, the warmest month on record. In all likelihood, we have never experienced a world so hot in modern history.
Are you surprised? You shouldn't be. That's because the World Meteorological Organization predicted back as early as May of this year that there will be a 98% likelihood that one of the next 5 years will be the warmest on record. Experts were right about it then, and today they're saying it's not by accident. And it's not just that temperatures have gotten this high. It's that they're only going to get warmer going forward. Here's Carlo again.
The anomaly for the month as a whole is also likely to be close within the observational error or the observational uncertainty to the 1.5 degree limits mentioned in the Paris Agreement at the monthly level. Unfortunately, as Chris was alluding in his introduction, the observed extreme is very unlikely to be a one-off event. The warming of the climate system is making this extreme much more likely.
We're pausing for a quick break now. When we return, what does this news mean for us in the Philippines?
El Nino is present in the tropical Pacific based po dun sa criteria na in-establish ni Pag-asa na kung saan 3 buwan na mag-a-average ng pag-init ng temperatura ng dagat o 0.5 degrees centigrade ay ma-attain po. Ka-release lang po ng CPC NOAA din yung observations nila na April, May, June ay 0.5 degrees centigrade na reach na po yung criteria. So, ibig sabihin po ng El Nino Advisory, take action.
That's Annalisa Solis, head of the Pag-asa Climate Monitoring and Prediction Section. She predicts that El Nino will begin by third quarter of 2023 or between July and September and will last until next year. In the Philippines, temperatures reached up to 37 degrees, while the heat index, which is the temperature that people feel based on the air temperature and relative humidity in an area, that rose to a peak of 48 degrees in Butuan in late April. And that was one of the highest temperatures recorded in the country ever. In a study published in 2019, the Philippines topped the list of countries most susceptible to hazards brought about by climate change. It's possibly one of the most concrete manifestations of global warming. In March of this year, a survey by the social weather stations found that 93% of Filipinos say they've personally experienced the effects of climate change in the past 3 years. We have commonly experienced hotter days, more frequent flooding, and more intense storms.
Nandiyan na yung El Nino doon sa Central Equatorial Pacific. Mainit na talaga yung karagatan natin. Pero yung impact nito ay hindi pa natin totally nararamdaman. Although nagbigay na tayo ng advance information para dun sa early preparation, talagang mainit na yung dagat. Ibig sabihin, dire-diretso na ito, nandiyan na yung El Nino sa karagatan, mainit na. So wala na tayong nakikita na hindi ito magkakaroon ng impact sa atin. Kailangan talaga, seryoso na tayo kasi advisory na ito. Siguro yun ang kailangan tandaan ng ating mga kababayan.
Experts like Chris Hewitt are spelling it out quite plainly. The next few months in terms of global mean temperature are also likely to break records.
So this extreme heat, it shouldn't really come as a surprise. Scientists have been warning us about this for many, many years. Actually, throughout my entire career, we've been warned about global warming. And El Nino and climate change will likely combine to fuel global temperature increases, and we anticipate we'll see the warmest year on record sometime in the next 5 years. It's not looking at the moment like the warmth will abate. So if this carries on, and with the El Nino conditions growing in the Pacific, we could anticipate it being a very warm year, if not a record year, but we'll have to wait and see.
Let's listen to Dr. Erlinda Llamas Clark. She teaches at the UP Philippine General Hospital and is part of its subcommittee on climate change and disaster risk preparedness.
Every one of us will be affected. Climate change presents grave risks that demand society's urgent attention. We need to adapt to this change, cut our greenhouse gas emissions, and support policies and laws for low carbon and renewables in the future. We need to also put the needs of the poorest and the most vulnerable, not only in our country, but in the world, because those that are actually using less or producing less carbon emissions are the ones who are suffering. So we need to have consumption that is tempered. Climate change is a problem of personal consumption as well. So we need to actually ask ourselves, are we living simply, using basic and essential goods with our food choices? Are we adding to it our use of the water, making use of natural products, using less fuel, like walking or biking and traveling less, maybe having an efficient living by transferring to smaller houses and having less clutter and recycling and reusing things.
Obviously, personal and individual responsibility is a start, but the way forward is ultimately much more systemic than that.
The very difficult thing to do is to limit the increases in greenhouse gas concentrations and ultimately reduce the greenhouse gas concentrations. So that's what the governments around the world are trying to do. So, for example, the next chance will be at COP28 at the end of November this year in the United Arab Emirates, and take forward and take climate action.
Again, that was Chris Hewitt, Director of Climate Services at the WMO. Here's what UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres had to say before the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
I'm also calling on CEOs of all oil and gas companies to be part of the solution. They should present credible, comprehensive, and detailed transition plans in line with the recommendations of my high-level expert group on net zero pledges. And these plans must clearly detail actual emission cuts for 2025 and 2030, and efforts to change business models to phase out fossil fuels and scale up renewable energy. This acceleration has already started in some sectors, but investors now need crystal clear signals. And all governments need the assurance that business leaders will help them deliver on extra efforts, but government must also create an enabling policy and regulatory environment. Shipping, aviation, steel, cement, aluminum, agriculture, every sector must be aligned with net zero by 2050, with clear plans, including interim targets to get there.
The solution for this is far from simple, and it has to be a choice we make together. Because at the end of the day, it's going to take a fair amount of political will from leaders all around the world. On our part, the government of the Philippines has pledged to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 70% by 2030. It's an ambitious target, considering the steps needed to be done to reach it. The burning question now is this: are we doing enough here at home? We leave you with Climate Change Commission Executive Director Roberto Borge at the Environmental Department's post-SONA discussion.
It's important to note also that under this administration, we have been making good headways in our greenhouse gas inventory. And we're working on completing we've already done the 2010, but right now we're completing 2015 and 2020. We would say that it's a whole-of-world approach because the problem of climate change is global, it's historic, and it's also systemic. And I think it puts a very good context to the work that we do if we also understand not just the responsibilities of the Philippines as a party to the UNFCCC, but also the responsibilities and commitments of the developed countries or industrialized countries that have been historically responsible for climate change.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka News. Again, I'm Franco Luna. This episode was edited by Freddy Blanco. Our Teka Teka News executive producer is Jill Caro, and our senior editor is Veronica Uy. And if you're watching this on YouTube and you appreciated the episode, please do take the time to like and subscribe to our channel. It really does help us out in the YouTube algorithm. Thanks for listening.